Well, on behalf of the Santa Barbara County Fire Chiefs, welcome to the fire season briefing for 2014. We're especially indebted today to the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum for hosting us today. It's one of my favorite rooms in Santa Barbara, and so thank you very much for donating the use of the room today. And I especially want to thank Meredith Moore for all her support this week and forever, actually. And I want to also thank Schritz Vines from Santa Barbara, the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf on Delavine and Strait for donating the refreshments today. A quick comment on our process before we begin today. We're not going to do a traditional press conference where we're going to be doing Q&A from the stage. What we're going to do is we're going to go through a briefing similar to what an incident management team would give firefighters on a briefing at an actual incident. And so we're going to go through the various disciplines that are addressed during a fire. We're going to try to move pretty briskly, but I think it's going to be a very informative program for everybody here. But as you can see, we're not going to be doing Q&A from the stage, but there's breakout tables all around the room, and all the speakers will be represented there, and all the chiefs will be available, and we'll stay here as long as anybody wants to talk to us about any topic that we've covered today, or if you have questions about things that aren't covered today. With that, I'll turn it over to Planning Section Chief Ann Marks.
Thank you. I'm Ann Marks. I'm the Wildland Specialist with the City of Santa Barbara Fire Department, and I'm also the Plans Chief for a local federal fire team, our Central Coast team. And our objectives for this incident are to provide for public and the firefighters' safety through any incident that we have in Santa Barbara County and the state, engage the community on their role in preparing for wildland fires. We want to provide the 2004 fire season outlook for Santa Barbara County. And then lastly, we want to outline the 2014 resources available for fire response throughout the county. So with that, I will turn it over to our next speaker.
Okay, well, first of all, I'd like to say thanks for coming. Thanks for having me also, in particular to Chief Pat McElroy and Ann Marks for even allowing an academic up here to speak with you. My name's Max Moritz. I'm faculty at UC Berkeley, where I have a research and extension lab, and I run that lab remotely here from the University of California Cooperative Extension Office in Santa Barbara County. And my statewide responsibility is on fire. And so I spend a lot of my time looking at fire history patterns, like those that you see up on this first slide, to try to understand why we see different fire regimes or fire patterns that we see on the landscape, and what we can do to manage them and learn to live with them. So just to start off, we'll take a step back and look at the wider trends that have been observed across the western U.S. This is from a paper that was just published recently. I was a collaborator on this, where we looked at the last 25 years or so of fire in the whole western U.S. And we see in these different ecoregions, that's what each of these plots on either side of the map represent, we basically see some very consistent trends that through time we're seeing greater and greater numbers of large fires occurring. And they're occurring in for different reasons in different areas. But what's notable for us, the lower left-hand plot there, is that actually we're not seeing an increase through time. The Mediterranean parts of California are always fire-prone every year, and we have a different set of drivers that's causing trends in our part of the world. And we don't see the same trends that we see in other parts of the state. And in essence, a lot of these other parts of the state are kind of catching up with us. We have a fire-prone season every year that we need to think about. Well, why? Next slide shows the last 50 years of fire history patterns for Santa Barbara County. One of the things we want to do is look at patterns like this and try to tease out what is it about the vegetation, what is it about the climate and the weather patterns and the ignition patterns that give us the patterns that we see here locally, and how they might differ from other places nearby. So one of the things when we think about vegetation, the next slide shows us a typical landscape. This is our own front country, chaparral, shrubland-dominated landscape. We have an annual drought basically a Mediterranean climate, is characterized by cool, wet winters and warm, dry summers. And that's what this little climograph, this little plot in the upper right-hand corner shows us. It shows us that there's this period of the year where temperatures are warm and we have no rain. And that actually has, over the long term, led to drought-adapted vegetation dominating our landscapes. But it also provides a nice window in time every single year, just about, when fires can be very common. The next slide shows us the role of live fuel moisture, LFM. That seasonal drought is actually represented or tracked by the amount of moisture that is in the leaves of the plants that dominate our landscapes here. And so what we're looking at here in the green line is showing the long-term annual trend or long-term average trend over the course of a year here. And it is from the Los Padres National Forest San Marcos Pass site where they're sampling chamise, a common chaparral shrub. And we see this wet up in the spring and then a typical dry down, and it approaches this 60% level, which is what a lot of the agencies consider a critically low live fuel moisture. Well, the other blue line on this figure is actually chamise that we've been sampling locally. We noticed that there weren't any live fuel moisture sampling stations on the front country where people live, and so we started our own volunteer-based sampling program with volunteers from the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden working with us in local cooperative extension to do the first citizen science-based live fuel moisture sampling program probably in the country. And so that's shown here in blue over the last year. And what shows up there is that it's very dry. It's much drier than the long-term average. And those little jumps are due to rainfall events. Now, on the next slide, we will add in this red line, and that's Big Pod Ceanothus. And this is from the same site about halfway up Painted Cave Road. And you see that this is a much more, I don't want to call it flashy, but a much more responsive species to local environmental variation. So when we do get a little rainfall, it jumps up higher than the chamise, and when it gets dry and we haven't had rain for a long time, it actually gets quite a bit drier than chamise. And so this is interesting for a number of reasons, but number one, it's the most dominant plant on the front country. So having information like this to help us make decisions locally and to educate citizens about fire and public safety is important. And that's one of the things we're striving to do within cooperative extension. So the next slide shows us a neighboring region just to the south. That's the Santa Monica Mountains there along the coast, and we see lots and lots of fire there, right? And if you think back to the fire to the fire history patterns that we looked at for Santa Barbara, it looked quite a bit different. Here, further south, we have a lot more darker red, which is over 50 years. This is representing more frequent patches that have burned. And one of the reasons for that is again, we have similar vegetation, but part of that story is in how we've developed and how we live on the landscape, but also fire weather patterns, right? Those are some of the other factors that come in to control long-term fire regimes. And what's different about this part of the world than Santa Barbara? So fire weather patterns that hit across most of Southern California, the characteristic fire weather pattern that we tend to worry about is Santa Ana winds. And so this map is showing us where Santa Anas, when they are occurring, where they're really hitting hard, and that's shown in the darker red. Those are those fire weather corridors in darker red. And in lighter colors, what areas seem to be a little bit sheltered from Santa Ana winds. And we see Santa Barbara as one of these regions that's actually a little bit sheltered from Santa Ana. So that's one of the things that causes or drives larger, more frequent fires in other areas like the further to the south that we just looked at. We have our sundowner winds here locally, and of course those are associated with some of our worst fires, but we don't get Santa Anas per se here. Also further south, we have a lot more people. So in this slide here, we're looking at a map of what we call the wildland-urban interface. basically a map of population densities and how they come together with our wildlands, and how much of that and how densely we've fragmented natural landscapes in this region. And this particular map shows both the Santa Barbara region and the area to the south. And you can see from this map that we have a lot more of this red and yellow interface and intermix, different population densities basically, further to the south. So basically a lot more ignitions, which lead to a lot more frequent fires further to the south. So all in all, we have kind of a unique combination of factors that give us the fire history that we have here locally. And those of us who study fire history kind of break it into these three groups of ignitions, something about the vegetation, the resources to burn, and something about the atmospheric conditions that lead to fire-prone conditions, the length of the fire season or the frequency of extreme fire or weather events like sundowners or Santa Anas. Something to keep in mind, it could be a lot worse, right? We could have a lot more ignitions and a lot worse fire weather than we actually do have. And we need to learn to coexist with fire. The bottom line is that fire is not going away, and we live on fire-prone landscapes, and we have to somehow become aware of the steps we need to take to learn to coexist with wildfire. Thank you very much.
Good morning, I'm David Niels with Santa Barbara County Fire. Fire weather is primarily affected by air temperature, relative humidity, atmospheric stability, wind, and precipitation. After the driest December to February period on record for most of the state, conditions south of Point Conception continue to receive well below normal rainfall totals. The ongoing lack of substantial rains within the county will rapidly change fuel conditions in coming months to critical levels. The slide that's up on the screen right now shows that Santa Barbara County is included in the Exceptional Drought Index, which is the highest measure of drought. 25% of the state of California is currently deemed to be in an exceptional drought. The entire county of Santa Barbara was within this area. Temperature trends continue to show warming conditions, suggesting the development of an El Niño cycle. Predictions for this spring and summer are favoring the development of a moderate El Niño, but there is still significant uncertainty about how strong it will be. This will be a major factor determining weather patterns for this summer and beyond. As you see on both these slides, warmer than normal conditions are expected for most of the West. Looking at the red flag warning, here are the stats for 2013 up to this period of time of 2014. We've issued 5 red flag warnings throughout the county of Santa Barbara. The mountain area, as you see on this map, was included in all 5 of those events, while the Cuyama Valley was only included in 2, and the South Coast and the Santa Ynez Valley were included in 1 of those events each. The red flag warning criteria deals with low relative humidities and sustained wind speeds, either 25 mile per hour with frequent gusts, or winds of 15 mile per hour with frequent gusts over 25. Both of these warnings require a duration of 6 hours or more. There's also other factors determined by the National Weather Service, and if we're dealing with widespread lightning. For residents within Santa Barbara County, we have the ability to notify them of any red flag warnings that are issued within the county. They can text red flag to 888-777 to be updated anytime there is a red flag warning within the county. Thank you, and Jay is up next with fire behavior.
And low pressure off the south coast of California. As that high pressure shifts to the southeast, the sundowners actually diminish and the Santa Ana winds develop in Southern California. So the reason the sundowners happen here on the Santa Barbara front country is because the Santa Ynez mountain range is orientated east and west, and there's 4 major passes on that mountain range: the Nahoe, Refugio, San Marcos, and Romero. And so as that north wind makes its way down the state of California, it hits this mountain range and funnels through those passes. And as it does that, it accelerates down into the Santa Barbara front country. creating adverse conditions. So you can see here, this is a diagram showing north wind flow patterns. And as it makes its way down the state and hits this is the range here, the Santa Ynez, it picks up speed as it funnels through those passes down into Santa Barbara. And then this is a model that shows the Santa Ana winds, and you can see it's a northeast wind that funnels through Southern California, and then the coast here of Santa Barbara is sheltered. So in conclusion, we have critical levels in our heavy fuels. There's a potential above normal for fires to occur in our area, and during wind events, that potential increases. Thank you.
My name is Jeff Saley. I'm the Wildland Fire Specialist for Montecito Fire Protection District, and I'm going to be talking to you about safety today, safety in the fire environment. First couple of slides here are basically to give the audience a perspective of how dangerous and dynamic an environment fire is, rapidly changing, and what dictates that rapid change. That's the, Jay was speaking of the fire triangle, fuels, the type of fuels, the amount of fuel in a given area and the location of those fuels. Weather, which is a very dynamic thing, and you aren't going to do anything about weather, but you can do accurate predictions of weather and very localized predictions. Those are the key components of weather in a fire environment. Topography, and Jay talked about topography, the lay of the land, whether you're in the flats, whether you're in a chute, whether you're on a ridge top or a saddle, that's going to dictate what that fire is actually going to do. Now, all of those conditions, the fire triangle, interrelate. They're interrelated to one another. You need to think about safety in the fire environment from your perspective. Now, we've got firefighters here, and we've got media here. We also have property owners and associations that represent the community. Be thinking about fire safety in the fire environment from your perspective. First of all, firefighters. We call them marching orders, the 10 standard firefighting orders. They're like our 10 commandments. I'm not going to go into each one of them here, but there's a developed handout. There's a handout that's available on the safety table over here, the operations and safety table. But they are our 10 commandments, and we like to say we don't bend them, we don't break them. The next marching order for firefighters are the 18 situations that absolutely shout, watch out. These are situational awareness things. They're warning signals, and it's important for you as a firefighter, or you if you're in a public assistance role in the fire environment, to pay attention to each one of these. So these are the 10 and 18s. A lot to carry around in your pocket, a lot to keep in your head. If you aren't able to do that, you can remember the letters LCES: lookouts, communications, escape routes, and safety zones. If you can remember those four and practice making sure that you have those four conditions in place in the fire environment, you'll assure you and your fire forces your safety. From a community perspective, there are 3 words: ready, set, and go. Chief Latipo is going to talk in detail about these 3 words, but being ready and getting set and going are basically planning functions. Planning ahead, planning during an event. What are you going to do? So having those 3 ready, set, go in your rear pocket, that's going to assure your safety. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Woody Enos. I'm the Operations Division Chief for the Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I've been very fortunate to be on some command teams with CAL FIRE. I've spent 6 years in the Operations Chief with them. Also worked with the Los Padres Type 2 team. And was lucky enough to go to Redding all the way down to the Mexican border in San Diego and fight fires. And some of the most dangerous fires that we've had actually occur on the Santa Barbara front country. As you know, just 5 years ago, we had the Jesucita fire. And it was very damaging and devastating. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Unified Command. The first thing is we're all coming together as separate agencies: the Forest Service, Santa Barbara City, Montecito CARP, the county, and many other agencies that are working together and trying to get together a plan. We're going to get together and set objectives. We're trying to build our relationships and priorities and develop some strategy. Also the coordination piece on how we're going to fight this fire, whether each agency's concerns, and the most important part of it is the spirit of cooperation between all of our agencies. We do this by getting the 911 call first, and that's the start of the process. Then it goes to the appropriate dispatch center, whoever that may be, and then we start ordering resources. And you can almost think of it like a pebble in a pond. So if you're to throw a pebble in a pond, and we start with the resources that are right there next to the incident, and once we exhaust that local area, we start tapping other agencies to the north and south of us. When it gets very large, we start tapping into the larger agencies like CAL FIRE and the Forest Service, and some of our cooperators in Los Angeles and even up in the Northern California area. Operations. This is where the rubber meets the road. We talked about some of the winds, some of the fuel conditions, but once the fire burns, this is where the rubber meets the road and the boots get to the ground. This picture right here is on Branch 2 on the Jesucita fire in 2009. We were talking about overall incident strategies, the safety and welfare of all personnel. We're working on a day plan, a night plan. This operation is 24 hours. The evacuation component, since the paint fire, June 27, 1990, we unfortunately had 1 fatality in the Trout Club. That was in most part due to the 911 evacuation system, working with the Sheriff's Department and getting people out of the fire's front. Our main job is to get people down to the 101 from up in the hills and get people out of the way. The next thing is contingency planning. We're always working on contingency planning in case things don't go right, that we have backup plans in place. Thanks. The operation response plan, our first alarm, we send 4 engines, 2 dozers, 2 hand crews, a water tender, a battalion chief, helicopter and air attack, and air tankers. I won't go into the air resources. That'll be next with John Crotty. So it's a wave of responses, of alarms, of equipment that come on a first alarm. Once we exhaust that and the fire is much bigger than that resource profile can handle, we hit the second alarm, which is an additional first alarm, which includes a division chief and safety officer. If it gets bigger than that, then we start calling for resources from out of the area. So this is where I wanted to get to. If you look down on the bottom, when a fire starts, one of the most important things for us in safety is to start in the black area or the burnt edge. And if you look at the bottom where the engine's starting, we're starting a progressive hose lay. This was a few years ago just south of Buellton on the 101 called the Highway Fire. It's about 100 acres, burning about mid-slope, started on the 101, it's working its way up to the top of the ridge line. So our engines will start on the bottom with a hose lay. You can see that the dozer on the right-hand side is kind of leapfrogging, getting ahead of the engines, and they're going to start getting right to the fire's edge, which is the next ridge over. The helicopters are up above trying to cool it down for both the engine companies, the crews, and the dozers. The retardant and aircraft are up above trying to put retardant up on the ridge line to hold it and check it for us until we can get up there. The guys that are going to end up getting at the very top are the Marines of the fire department. And that's the hand crews, the Los Padres hotshots, all the hand crews, even the CAL FIRE crews and all the county crews here on the bottom that we have that we're trying to start up this year. These are the guys that are getting way up high on the ridge line and putting the fire out, putting it to bed and getting every single ember out. One of the things that we have when we talked about unified command is the spirit of cooperation. And one of the things that we do, we have a county website that is internal to the county fire agencies, so we can see exactly who's on duty each and every day. And we can communicate with all the battalion chiefs and chief officers. In case we get a large event, we know who to call, and we know what resources and engines and water tenders and dozers are available to us when we get a fire. This is another one of the staffing patterns that we show every day throughout the agencies. We email everybody, we talk to each other. And this was a picture of the Jesucito fire when it started in 2009. We're getting prepared for this. I would say to you that you have some of the best firefighters sitting in this room today that will help serve this community and put this fire out. Our job in operations is to put the fire out. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm John Crotty, Air Operations Branch Director on Central Coast Incident Management Team 7 and a captain out at Vandenberg Fire Department. Air operations resources available to us in the county is dependent on the time of the season, the commitment of these air assets on other incidents throughout the nation, and in general, we have air resources spread throughout California at air tanker bases and helibases within a roughly 20-minute flight time radius to give us a strong initial attack air fleet to hopefully suppress the fires. There's also numerous amounts of permanent helibases where we have agency aircraft, whether it's the counties or the Forest Service as they come on through the season starting in May and into June for our surrounding areas here. In case of a major incident, we'll set up a large helibase close proximity to the fire, which helps us cut down on the flight time, makes our operation a lot more efficient, and it gives us a base of operation to start flying firefighters and equipment out to the line. We'll fly that out to the helispots, which are remote. You can see a lot smaller area for a helicopter to land and work from. And that's a place where we can offload those firefighters and get them engaged in firefighting. Orchestrating all this is we have a fixed wing and rotor wing, and above that we have an air attack platform that'll be in one of these small fixed wing aircraft, and they're working on managing those air assets, making sure they can get to where we want them tactically, and also avoid any congestion in the airspace and hopefully prevent any type of an accident with the aircraft. They supervise, they communicate with the folks on the ground, the command staff, as well as the boots on the ground, the firefighters, with what exactly we're trying to do with these aircraft. They help organize that airspace by the use of the fire traffic area. So that's a brief picture there. The air attack is up on the top of that. The air tankers are sorted out in an orbit at different altitudes, and then the helicopters down below. So we can keep, when we have a large fire like a La Brea or Hesacita and there's 20 aircraft over the fire, keep them well spaced and in a safe flight pattern there. To do that, the air attack can rely on a lead plane. That's the smaller plane in front of the DC-10 there. They can come down through the flight path, check for turbulence, give some direction to that air tanker where they want to start the drop, and then end the drop. When it comes to the air tankers, they're broken down by category. We have the very large air tankers. We have the DC-10, which currently one is stationed over at Santa Maria. But they're nomads. They can run throughout the nation based on fire severity and where the action is. On the federal side, we have large air tankers and medium air tankers. These air tankers commonly work out of Santa Maria, and again, they're not always stationed there, but can be there when things are really hot and heavy in this area. On the CAL FIRE side, we have the S2Ts here. These are the Type 3 air tankers, a little smaller when it comes to the amount of retardant that they can put out there, and they're stationed out of Paso Robles with 2 air tankers and an air attack as well up there. It's not dependent upon the air attack to take a state ship back to a state base. They can reload at any of the tanker bases, and that air attack will help orchestrate and organize that where we get a quick return on that air tanker to help suppress the fire and get the retardant on the ground as fast as we can. And the last on the air tankers, we have the single engine air tankers. These can be set up in a mobile location as long as we can find either a remote airstrip or a small road. Somewhere isolated, we can set up even a mobile retardant plant to quickly fill these and make very short turnarounds for these air tankers out to the fire. The helicopters we break out as well by category based on the gallons of water retardant they can put out, the size of the aircraft, and the number of passengers. The workhorses of that are these mediums. They're more multifunctional than the Type 1s. We can fly firefighters in these out to the line. We can sling cargo with them. And we can also do medevac missions as well as the water dropping and retardant. And then we'll use the smaller Type 3 helicopters to do our recons and mapping missions to give support back to plans and help the incident action plan get formed by the teams. When the state gets into some critical levels of drawdown for air assets, we can also enlist the help of the Air National Guard out of Port Hueneme. So we can bring in air tankers from them as well as helicopters that can drop retardant and water, and also use the helicopters for medevac or night missions as well. Around the area here, we have roughly 9 agency and private vendor type aircraft that can come and support all risk missions as well. So not just fire, whether it's a mass casualty, flood, disaster, or earthquake, we can rely on some of these other agencies to assist us. Becoming a new trend with the urban interface and more and more fires related to that is night operations with aircraft. And we have county fire agencies that can provide night helicopter support, and the Angeles Forest Helicopter 531 can also do that. And the Forest Service can provide us with night air attack for supervision in the sky as well. All this comes with a balance with all those air assets, and that's safety. And we're impacted by pilot and flight duty times. Mostly we're impacted by smoke. You saw some of the large pictures of Hesesita there with all that smoke laying over the city here. And it's hard to get an aircraft in safely underneath that or through that to do a drop and be efficient with it. So with winds like the Etowanda fire down in Southern California last week, 60-mile-an-hour winds would definitely shut down the air show. It's just not safe to fly. And sometimes it's just not the right tool. We really need the firefighters on the ground and other equipment to do the job better. The future for our operations in the county is very bright. We've got potential use of drones and unmanned aircraft around the corner, the night missions, and with all these air assets we have, we can continue to protect the firefighters and support the communities we serve. Thank you very much.
Good morning. My name is Doug Dixon, and I am a supervisor of the Fire Academy at the incredible new facility we built up in Lompoc, and I'm also a training specialist on the Central Coast Team 7. You guys will look at this and you'll say, okay, we've looked at weather, we've looked at what some of the positions are in air operations. How do we get people to do those jobs? In the wildland firefighting business, it's a very fine-tuned, well-developed system. Back in the 70s, the fire service came together, and California is kind of on the leading edge of coming together and coming up with proper communications, training systems, identification and definition of positions. And so the incident command system has got multiple positions that people will train and learn how to become. In our world, the top position on the fire is the incident commander. So how do you get there? So within that, the National Wildfire Coordinating Group put together position training task books and criteria for all the training that you have to do so that there's a roadmap for a person that comes in the fire service and wants to be able to get all the way up to an incident commander trained position. They will go through a series of training and on-the-ground training exercises where they're working with a trainer to become proficient in that job. So every position is very, very, very fine-tuned. So you'll take a class, you will then go out and train in that position with a trainer, and then you will fill out a training task book, which are identified critical tasks you have to perform, and then it comes back for review with your agency. So the training that we do in the fire service is really pretty critical because most of it is performance-based training, which means you're doing it. You will be on the ground, working in that position with somebody watching over your shoulder, and they will develop your skill set so that you become very proficient in what you do. I'm going to quote and give the credit to John Crowder right there because he'll get mad if I don't give him credit for this. But every day is a training day. And in that, In that, we're always learning new things. So to get better and more proficient at your job, I'm throwing up here just a schematic of one of the positions, which is within operations. Incident command system, we have command and general staff. And this is the operations section that Chief Enos and John Karate both were just talking about. So you can see for a person to become an operations section chief at the top, here is what they would have to do to get to that position. So each one defines required training, each one defines required experience and how you would climb up into that position. So we don't just have people going out and working at a higher level with just the fact that they may have a title from a department, say as a battalion chief, that they won't just necessarily with that title be proficient as an operations section chief without learning the system and how to climb up to that point. So it's created this way. So I'm going to real quickly just bring out the middle one right there, which is a division group supervisor position, which is an instrumental position for us for the guys on the ground that are actually putting the fire out. And here's a breakdown sheet. So you can see for a person that wants to know how to get to that position, it gives you what the required training is, it tells you what your experience has to be, and then you have to be able to complete those tasks under the supervision of a trainer so that you become qualified in that position. Now I'm going to quote Peyton Manning, quarterback of the Denver Broncos. He said just a few weeks ago when he was getting in trouble for doing things outside the training world that he's not supposed to, he said this quote, which follows in the fire service. He said, if you're not working to get better, you're getting worse. And so that applies to all of us in our jobs too, is that we're working and striving to become better. Once you've checked off your training information, you bring it back and we have local peer review committees that now start to verify that your training has been met. We look for quality of assignments, duration of the assignments, and now a peer of people will sit down, look at your application to become qualified in that position, and then we will determine whether or not that position has been met, and if you've met all the qualifications, and then we recommend you back to your department as qualified in the position. So, with that, every day is a training day. We have very specific positions. Within our coordination group, we have 108 positions identified with task books and with requirements to give you that roadmap to make yourself available to even eventually someday become an incident commander. Thank you very much.
Okay, everybody, my name is Robert Kovac, Battalion Chief at Carpinteria Fire. I also am part of the incident management team on the Central Coast. I'm a plans chief on the team, but I'm going to talk to you about logistics. So you've been hearing about all the different functions we do on these fires. Doug talked about the incident commander, the person in charge. Chief Enos talked about operations. I'm going to talk about logistics. And I think most of you know that without logistics, especially those of you who've been in the military, if you don't provide logistics to your Army, they're going to stop on you. They're going to quit working on you because they don't have the supplies they need. So in a fire, it's kind of the same concept. You need to have a logistics section set up to start getting supplies and items needed to your troops. So we provide the resources and the support to meet the operational plan. Okay, it's broken down. It really has 6 units in logistics. Each unit has their own function. EOCs, part of a city EOC, will break it down into branches called the service and support branch. Typically on a fire, we don't break it down into branches. We have one logistics chief or 2 running the 6 different units. Okay, before I get into the different units, one of the good things is during the off season, a lot of stuff is put in place so that when you need to set up logistics, there's already agreements in place, there's already vendors in place with signed contracts that you can call upon. And some of the typical things we do when you see us set up these large incidents, we tend to find parks and schools, fairgrounds, those type of facilities to set up our camps, and those agreements are already in place today. The logistic folks are out there, the federal folks, the state folks, go sign those agreements ahead of time so we have those available to us who already have them identified in our areas in this county where we're going to go if we need to set something up today, if something broke right now. And literally, you'll see it if you come out to our fires. It's like building a city overnight, kind of a tent city. We get into some trailers too, but it happens very, very rapidly. Tend to get these vendors and supplies in here quickly. There's also national caches of supplies, and there's local caches of supplies. So when you start breaking big fires, you determine how many people this fire's going to have assigned to it, And if you get into the 250 plus, there's larger supplies you can order, and as it gets bigger, you just order more and more of these caches, and they can get flown here and brought in here rapidly. Los Padres National Forest has 2 local caches. I think they're 250-person caches immediately available to us. Okay, let's talk about one of the units, facilities. So each unit has to do a lot of work, make plans, have meetings and whatnot, so we got to build some facilities for them. A lot of times we may be out in the middle of a dirt lot if it's remote, so we got to bring in, typically these tents are very easy for us to get. If the vendors are available and there isn't too many fires going on, we have these trailers that come out and set up, give us some office space to get some work done. Again, those are through local vendors with built-in agreements. Secondary, sometimes facilities, they're in charge of setting up the camp. If it's a large enough fire, they may have to build multiple camps for this fire, which does happen in this county. If you get too big of a fire, 100,000 acres plus, too far travel time for the firefighters to get out to the scene, so we may build a secondary, sometimes even a third camp to support those firefighters. Cut down on our driving time. Okay, supplies. Most of the firemen, we carry a lot of supplies on our engines, but they start getting used up quickly. Your hose can get used up, they can get burned, your tools may need to get replaced, or you're bringing in people that are flown in from outside the area. A lot of times we'll do that. We'll bring in entire hand crews on airplanes, get them in a bus, get them to the camp. Now we got to get some supplies going for them. So we set up a full supply camp, as you see here, with lots of inventory for everybody. Ground support. So you're going to have all these vehicles on your fire. You need to support those vehicles. They're going to have possible repair problems. They're going to need some fuel. You're going to need to maybe supply vehicles to people who didn't show up in a vehicle, who were flown in. And you're going to need to shuttle things around all over your fire, from that camp maybe out to the line, help get some supplies out there. Ground support takes care of all of that. Okay, communications, another critical one. We have to establish a communications plan, but in that plan, we also have to typically build a communication system. The beginning of a fire, we're typically on the local fire frequencies, but once the fire gets to a certain point, or certain duration, or certain size, you want to get off of those frequencies for the next event that may happen. So not only does communications have to build a frequency plan, they have to build the system. So they bring in what's called portable repeaters. They put them on mountaintops. They determine how many of those are needed, and then they assign the frequencies. The other interesting thing for communications, they have to establish what frequencies we're going to use and make sure it's not going to feed back on a fire that's 20 miles away. If you look in the middle of the summer when we get multiple fires, there's a lot of coordination and frequencies that we're going to use. You can't be on this frequency if you have a fire that's a couple mountain ranges over. You might bleed over into their frequency. So a lot of that coordination has to happen. The other thing they do is they bring in a cache of radios and batteries for our radios. Medical unit. We have to establish a medical plan. If any of our personnel, response personnel out on the fire get hurt, how are we going to deal with that? Where are we going to take them? They typically set up a medical tent with some supplies in there to take care of us, but they also create a very important medical plan. What to do if there is an incident out on the fire, and that has to be established ahead of time. Where's the local ambulances coming from? Do we have air ambulances? Where's the nearest hospital, drive time, all that? And in addition, they typically put medically trained EMTs or paramedics out on the line with the firefighters. So cut down on the time to get to them if they do have an injury out there. And then last but not least is our food unit. We have to feed everybody out there, so most of the firemen are good about, we carry MREs on our engines, oh boy, and after a while we want to get fed some warm food, so we bring in these mobile kitchens. They typically, when they're fully set up, we get a hot meal in the morning, a hot meal at dinner, and a bagged lunch to take out onto the line. Works very well. That's about it. Thank you.
Okay, again, I'm Ann Marks, and did the introduction, Santa Barbara City Fire, and I'm going to talk about the plan section. So we've talked about operations, logistics, training. What the plan section does is takes all of the incident intelligence and puts it into a workable plan for the incident. So just as a business has to develop a plan, so does any emergency in order to achieve its objectives. So the plan's organization revolves around the collection of data and intelligence based on the situation. This slide just shows the organization within the plan section. And you can take a look at that. The key to any incident in the plan section is the planning cycle. The incident command system uses this planning cycle. An incident starts with initial attack, and as Woody, Chief Enos had said, if it's not if it's not controlled at initial attack, an organized structure is needed to address the multiple priorities, the growing organization, support for that organization, and the who, what, when, and where actions will take place to meet those objectives. So this is all coordinated through this planning cycle, and the planning section orchestrates all of that. So the cycle starts with the IC's, or the incident commander's, development of the incident objectives. The intelligence is collected, tactical decisions are determined, and brought forward in the ICS, Incident Command System organization, during the planning meeting. So we're all the way over and through here. During the planning meeting, the plan is proposed and a decisions are made on the plan of action for typically a 12-hour time frame, can be 24 hours, and then we also look at long-term time frames if that's needed for a growing incident. After our planning meetings, each function that we've kind of gone through submits the required inputs to the plan section so that we can compile, finalize, and complete the incident action plan for that 12-hour time frame. And this cycle continues and continues. We typically do it for a 12-hour time frame. So we've got 2 planning meetings a day, 2 briefings per day, and it just continues throughout the whole incident. All of the information that the public sees, that the media gets, that is distributed throughout the incident is compiled and displayed by the plan section through the situation unit. There's many forms of ways that we get that intelligence. There's mapping, there's field data, operations data, local knowledge, pre-plans. And really important is we have the fire behavior analyst and the incident meteorologist actually on the incident, feeding in all of that information throughout the whole incident. The other 2 units that are really important is the resource unit. The resource unit tracks all of the incident resources from the beginning to the end. And then when we have or have completed all of our assignments, maybe we're looking more at downsizing of the fire, we're getting more closer to control, we have to demobilize all of those units in a systematic manner. And the demobilization unit actually does that when they're no longer needed. And lastly, the plan section also is required to complete the documentation package for any incident. And that is ensuring accurate records are kept, and that's given back to the agency having jurisdiction. Thank you.
My name's Kurt Ladapow. I have the pleasure of being the fire chief for the city of Lompoc. I also serve as the president of the County Fire Chiefs Association. And for the last several years, I've been a member of the International Association of Fire Chiefs Wildland Fire Policy Committee, who developed the Ready, Set, Go program. Years and years ago, when I came on as a young rookie firefighter, we went out, we put the fire out. We really didn't do much with our citizens other than evacuate them. As the years have progressed, we realized it's time that we develop programs and we reach out to our citizens and embody the concept of living with fire. The Ready, Set, Go program is a county-wide program that's been embraced by all of the departments in the county. It includes our citizens, something that 30, 40 years ago we did not do. Now, with the Ready, Set, Go program, we empower our citizens to be partners in preparedness. You know, many, many times you've heard that, you know, it's not if, it's when we're going to have a wildland fire. In this season, it's not what month it's going to be, it's what day it's going to be. We all have a role. The Ready, Set program helps us to identify the expectations of our residents as well as your firefighters. Many years ago, we identified one of the challenges. Our residents felt that on any given day, on any wildland fire, there was going to be a fire engine sitting in their driveway. Well, one of the principles that we try to teach through Ready, Set, Go is it's important for you to have, you the citizens, to have a level of preparedness because there's not going to be a fire engine in every driveway. This particular slide says, be ready, be fire-wise. Fire-wise is one of the programs, but in our county, we also have the Fire Safe Council. Fire Safe Councils predate the Fire-wise program and have much the same information. These are the initial building blocks of preparedness. What you can do as a citizen to make a difference. Prepare a go kit. Have emergency supplies. Make sure you have your important documents. Create your own action plan. Know what's going on around you. One of the many tenets we share with our citizens through the Ready, Set, Go program is a little bit of fire behavior awareness, so you don't have to wait until the reverse 911 comes in to know when it's time to go. What can you do when the fire threatens? Remain alert, keep appraised of the situation, have that go kit, and be ready to get out when it's time to leave. So the Ready, Set, Go program is one of the basic building blocks of community preparedness, of your own personal salvation during an incident. But it also it teaches you some of the importance of working not just with your fire department, within your community. In the Ready, Set, Go program, we talk about defensible space of your home. As you transition into a more fire adaptive community, the Ready, Set, Go program will give you the basic building blocks to not just protect your own home, but your community as well. Thank you.
I'm Mike Dyer. I'm the Fire Chief of Santa Barbara County Fire Department. I'm also the Operational Area Coordinator in Santa Barbara County. I'm also the Chair of the Fire Scope Board of Directors for the state of California. I think we've heard a lot of great information today. I first want to recognize Chief McElroy, Ann Marks, and the presenters for an amazing job that they did today. Please give them an applause. I think in summarizing this is really a public-private partnership between us and the fire departments, local leaders in county, state, and city government, and also you, the citizens. And without us working very, very closely together, we can't accomplish what we need to do. So with that, I'll encourage you to go to your breakout groups, ask questions, and we're all here for you to ask us any questions you need, and have a safe season here this summer and the rest of the year. Thank you.